Hello, everyone. Good evening. So good to see everyone. We've got a lot of people excited about tonight and signed up, so we're just going to let a few minutes to give everybody a chance to get signed on. But while we are waiting for everyone to log on, I've got two questions for you. The first one is, where are you Zooming from? We cover 5 counties, so it's really exciting to see where everyone is Zooming in from. So if you want to put in the chat where you are tonight, that would be really fun to see. We'll see what comes up. Oh, there, I'm seeing something pop up in the chat. OMAC, yay! Hello, OMAC, Republic, Pateras, Ardenvor, yes. We got Chelan, Okanogan, and Ferry. Oh, Soap Lake. We got Grant County, Wenatchee, Manson, Wenatchee, Skagit County. Nice. Wow, we're just missing Douglas. We almost have all of our counties here. That's very exciting. All right, if you're just joining us, we are just waiting a few minutes to let everybody keep signing on here. We're asking people where they are Zooming in from. And then the second question is, because we really want to know, do you consider yourself an avid hiker, an occasional hiker, or not really a big hiker, but you're super curious to learn more tonight? I will put that in the chat so you can see, and we would love to hear what your responses are to know where people are at, right? We've got hikes for everybody tonight, but we're curious to know where your interest lies. Weekend warrior, occasional avid, nice. Waterville, perfect. So people are just signing on. We've asked 2 questions tonight because we want to know who you are. Where are you Zooming in from? And do you consider yourself an avid hiker, an occasional hiker, or not really a big hiker, but you're super curious to learn more? Occasional, good. Avid with timeout for hip surgery. Yeah, that sounds like some timeout is required, darn it. Weekend warrior, frequent hiker, great. Semi-avid. So I feel like most are hitting that novice. Great, glad to have you here. Curious to learn more, used to be a frequent hiker. Great. I'm so glad everybody joined us this evening from all across the span of interests and abilities. Oh, hey, former volunteer with the WTA. Yay, that's exciting. Okay, it looks like people have slowed, the joining has slowed down. So I would say let's get ready to launch. My name is Alicia. I am the Adult Services Manager here at NCW Libraries. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for Unveiling Central Washington's Best Hikes with Washington Trails Association. I was really amazed at all the interest tonight, so it's exciting to have you all here. And to have Claire and Holly from WTA here. If you are not aware, we have 30 branches at NCW Libraries and span 5 counties. And so virtual programming like this is really exciting because it's an opportunity for us to connect across our vast region with everyone. So thank you for being here for that. And a little bit of quick housekeeping. This is a meeting format, right? So feel free to have your camera on or off. It's really nice to see your faces, but you don't have to have your camera on tonight. We're just asking that during the presentation, people keep their microphones muted just to decrease any background noise. And there is going to be a Q&A session at the end, but feel free to ask questions at any time during the presentation. I have 2 quick little library commercials before we jump into things. First of all, so we're talking about hikes tonight. We're talking about getting out there, and the library is not just books. We have a really cool collection called the Library of Things. And 2 things I'm going to highlight tonight are the Discover Pass. This is what's required to get into any state park. And we have about 50 or so in our collection. So after I'm done talking, I'll put a link in the chat that you can request this. We can't mail it for mail order, but we can send it to any of our branches for you to pick up. So this will get you into any of our state parks, which is really cool and fun. And then one of my favorite things is our Checkout Washington pack. It comes in these beautiful equipped bags from Twist, and it includes the Discover Pass, binoculars for all the wildlife, bird watching, and then we have some really cool guides in here so you know what wildlife you're looking at, birds, trees, wildflowers, all those things. So these things can be requested and checked out, which is really exciting. People are still coming in. This is so cool. Okay, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to do these really fun bios that Claire and Holly sent me and then hand it over to them. First up, we got Claire Thompson. Claire had the good fortune to grow up with Seattle's urban wilderness as her playground. After starting her career in environmental journalism, Claire left the confines of her computer and found her place in the world of seasonal trail work, first with the Southwest Conservation Corps in Colorado, and eventually with the Forest Service back in Washington. Claire worked on and led their trail crews on the Okanogan Wenatchee National Forest for 7 years and is thrilled to join WTA as their Central and Eastern Washington regional manager. Woohoo! She's passionate about collaborative stewardship of public lands and excited to grow WTA's engagement with the diverse communities and landscapes of her adopted home east of the Cascades. Claire is a logout junkie who will take a cozy creekside camp over a windblown pass any day and thinks a book and a journal are always worth the wait in her pack. Welcome, Claire. And then we have Holly Weiler. Holly's passion for trails has its roots in trail running, but over the years has transitioned into a seasonal backpacker who loves her time in the backcountry. When she's not running or backpacking, you can find her doing trail maintenance as an early introduction to trail work through the Conservation Northwest, which turned into a bit of an obsession. And now she's the proud owner, which maybe this is even more now if it's not updated, but this is 4 crosscut saws and 2 Poliskis. And after several seasons of volunteer trail work and hikeathoning for WTA, she's excited to be doing outreach and leading trail work in the Spokane area. She also has her MFA in creative writing from Eastern Washington University in nonfiction. So please join me in welcoming Holly and Claire. Yay! Thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Alicia. Is it over to us now? Cool. Let me just pull up our slideshow here and share my screen. Let's see. Does that look good? Awesome. Cool. So before we dive into some hiking recommendations, we just wanted to give a quick overview of the Washington Trails Association. I'm sure some of you are probably somewhat familiar with WTA, but yeah, we just wanted to orient everyone about who we are and how we came to be.
So as a statewide nonprofit organization, we've been around since 1966. You'll notice those t-shirts on the right. We started off as the Signpost magazine, which was actually published in our founder's barn. And over the years, we have really grown, and now it's no longer about just sharing information, although that's still a huge aspect of what we do, but also protecting trails and advocating for trails across the state of Washington.
So 2023 is actually kind of a big year for WTA. This is the 30th anniversary. Actually, I think coming up next week is the 30th anniversary of WTA doing trail maintenance. So actually getting out there and working on trails. It's the 20th anniversary of our hikeathon fundraiser. And it's the 10th anniversary of our outdoor leadership training program. Over on the west side, we have a couple gear libraries and programs to build the next generation of outdoor leaders, giving young people opportunities to hone their skills in the outdoors.
So just brief overview of some of the aspects of what we do across the state. We do have a very strong advocacy program, and there are advocacy email newsletters that come out about once a month if folks are interested in receiving those. We do trail maintenance across the entire state, and we've transitioned into year-round. I think it's always been year-round on the west side, but for me, I'm in North Spokane County, and we get winter. And we have started doing some snowshoe work parties as well. We have youth programs across the state. We have our online resources for hikers, and we advocate strongly for community building as a community of hikers.
There we go. Oh yeah, so I guess we forgot to say where we're coming from. Holly mentioned she's north of Spokane, and I'm here in Peshastin. Here's a little map with some stats of where we did trail work last year in 2022. So 2023 numbers still forthcoming.
And then we just wanted to highlight some of the resources that are available to all hikers via our website. So if you haven't had a chance to check it out yet, this is WTA.org. One really fantastic aspect is our Hike Finder map. It allows you to find hikes anywhere in the state where you're interested in hiking. You can zoom right in on the area that you're interested in going to.
So yeah, if you are following along at home and you want to navigate to this map while we're chatting, so you can look up the hikes we're talking about, I recommend doing that, or you can go to it later.
Another one of our resources are the trip reports, and these are things that you can either choose to write yourself in order to share information with the hiking community, or you can read the trip reports from others from areas that they've gone. So actually, I pulled one of my old ones because that's the favorite photo I've ever taken of a pika. But there are lots more recent trip reports than that. And it's a great way of learning current conditions for an area that you're interested in going for a hike. Or you can go back through all of the historic trip reports and find what kind of conditions one might expect at specific times of the year.
Awesome. Whoops. There we go. Okay, now we're going to get into talking about some hikes, some of our favorite hikes. And Holly's going to kick us off with Ferry County.
Yeah, so Ferry County, I can't talk about Ferry County without talking about the Kettle Crest. And the Kettle Crest is the big one. From end to end, it's 43 miles. That entire 43 miles, or the majority of it, is part of the Pacific Northwest National Scenic Trail, which is actually one of the long trails. It starts in Glacier National Park and it heads all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And the Kettle Crest is a segment of that trail. So if you hike the Kettle Crest, you're a section hiker. Or if you're interested in a much longer hike, you could start the research to do the whole thing. And the 43 miles, it can be split into multiple days. It's Forest Service land, so this is a great one for backpacking trips for anyone who's interested in backpacking. But there are also many different feeder trails all along the route. And so it's possible to start a shorter segment of the Kettle Crest without doing the full 43 miles. Some of my favorites include starting at the very far north end at Deer Creek Boulder Summit Road, or starting right at Sherman Pass on Highway 20. So really easy access, paved road right to the trailhead. Or if you don't mind a Forest Service road, the White Mountain Trailhead at the south end of the Kettle Crest is also really beautiful. So some photos of Kettle, if you could have you go back one, Claire.
Yeah.
So focus a little bit on Kettle Crest North first. So this segment of the Kettle Crest is just over 30 miles. And the first photo that you're looking at on the left is the summit of Copper Butte. And so this can be a trail that you hike to from Sherman Pass, or there's another trailhead that's much closer that's called the Old Stage Road Trailhead. But it's the highest point on the entire Kettle Crest, and the trail goes right over the summit of that mountain. So really incredible views. I took that photo a couple of years ago in October, so you can see that sometimes the high country gets a little bit of snow early because that was October, but the summit of Copper Butte is above 7,000 feet elevation. But then it also gives you a sense of how the fall colors really start to pop up there in October. And I have hiked the Kettle Crest. Well, it's another slide in a moment. You can access portions of this year round. But for Copper Butte specifically, it's best through about the end of October into early November. On the right, you're looking at some of the sunset views. Like a lot of the Kettle Crest has views facing both east and west because it is a north-south ridge trail. So really incredible views from all along the summits along the way. And multiple access points, some of which actually have free Forest Service campgrounds. So for those who like to camp but not backpack, that's also another really good option. And then if we could go forward one. There we go. Kettle Crest South. Oh, back one. There we go. So the south portion of the Kettle Crest is the section that runs between White Mountain Trailhead, which is accessed via Forest Service Road, and it heads right up to Sherman Pass on Highway 20. And it's just a little bit over 13 miles for that segment of the Kettle Crest. So the photo on the left here is Snow Peak Cabin, which is on the reservation system. So anyone who's interested in renting Snow Peak Cabin, there is a nominal fee to rent it, but it's a beautiful cabin. You can see the solar panel on top. So it has some small lights inside. It has a little propane cook stove. It has 4 cots. And it's a really lovely place to go. It's a very popular option in the winter. I've only managed to get reservations once in the winter, so you have to be on recreation.gov to find this one. But in the summer, there's a lot more flexibility. And so it's kind of a low-key backpacking option where you don't have to carry quite as much gear because you have a beautiful cabin to stay in. And then the photo on the right gives a sense. I wish I had that photo with fall colors, but what you're looking at there are some western larch, and those are the ones that really turn colors in the fall. And that's closer to the White Mountain Trailhead on that section. But some beautiful old growth trees. You'll notice around the cabin itself, the trees tend to be a little bit smaller. It was impacted by the White Mountain Fire of 1980. The north end of the Kettle Crest was affected by the Stick Pin Fire in 2015. And so there have been some frequent fires in the area and some of the trail impacts as a result of that. But you can see that a lot of the really beautiful old growth larch have also survived all of those fires, and it's beautiful. And if we can go forward one. Here we go. I also love to mention that the Kettle Crest is fantastic for year-round access. So there are actually 2 snow parks located on the Kettle Crest. The first one, photo on the left, is from Deer Creek Boulder Summit. That's the very far north end of the Kettle Crest. And then the photo on the right, I took last winter on a backpacking trip. Like, there's no reason to stop backpacking in the winter. So I backpacked up to Columbia Mountain right out of Sherman Pass in February. And you can tell I love sunrise. So this is a great one for fall and seeing the fall colors of the larch changing. But it's also something that's accessible even through the winter months if you have a snow park permit. Really good access for snowshoeing, and then there are groomed Nordic ski trails out of Deer Creek Boulder at the north end. Next slide. And then Okanogan County. This one is one of my selections as well. So this has been a location where we've been doing quite a bit of work for WTA Trail Work the last couple of seasons. Sweat Creek Picnic Area is located right off of Highway 20. And it's just a little bit to the west of Republic. It's actually pretty close to Republic, but it's on the Okanogan side of the county. And there's a trailhead access there for Clackamas Mountain, Sweat Creek drainage, and you can access Maple Mountain from this location. Really beautiful views. So that first picture I took is within a half mile of the trailhead. That's right when the views really start to open up. And that's actually the view of Fir Mountain, which is located just on the south side of the highway from the Clackamas Mountain Trail. And then the photo on the right I took up closer to Maple Mountain. But really beautiful views, still a portion of the Pacific Northwest National Scenic Trail. So longer hiking options in this location. I find that the best views are within the first mile of the trailhead. So it can be a really easy hike for somebody who just wants to get up and see some of the views and turn around and go back. But the entire trail continues on there's a nice campsite at the 5-mile mark. And then the summit of Clackamas Mountain is located at approximately the 7-mile mark for those who are interested in a little bit longer hike. And this is another trail that has some fantastic old growth larch, which means really beautiful fall colors. And another one of mine. So this one was a discovery last year. I actually received a tip from a Forest Service employee who said, you need to go camp at Lost Lake. It's the most beautiful Forest Service campground you've ever seen. And it's true. Like, it's a beautiful campground up there. Portions of the campground were built by the Civilian Conservation Corps along with this old guard station. And then the Big Tree Botanical Trail is located right out of the Lost Lake campground. It's a really beautiful non-motorized lake that's right there. And then for those who want to hike directly from a campsite at Lost Lake, it's up to 2.7 miles round trip to do the hike. But Big Tree Botanical Trail actually has a dedicated trailhead that's just another mile up the road. And so for a really short hiking option, it's a 0.7 mile wheelchair friendly trail. It was originally intended for ADA accessibility, although I have noticed that sometimes the maintenance is not quite all entirely up to snuff. And so it's one to be aware that there could be a few barriers on the trail, but it has several places to pull off and have a nice viewing platform. There are some benches along the trail. And then you can see on the right-hand side, with my dog for a little bit of sense of scale, there are 2 old growth larch trees that are estimated to be about 600 years old located on this route. And that photo was not taken when they were in their full larch color. So I think October should be prime time to really see both the old growth trees and also the surrounding forest with a lot of the fall color. And the campground is open through the end of October. So it's not accessible in the wintertime. They don't maintain the roads, but it will be available through the end of October, and really beautiful trail to see big trees. And then Whistler Canyon. This is my favorite for seeing bighorn sheep. I swear every time I go to Whistler Canyon, which is not as often as I'd like, but every time I see the bighorns. And honestly, when I took that photo on the right, I was standing really close to the parking lot. So they come right down to the pavement. So this is very close to Oroville. And this is another portion of the Pacific Northwest National Scenic Trail. And you can see it has a very vast trail system. I just went ahead and included the photo that you see at the trailhead that shows the whole map. Some of my favorites are to just stay within like the first couple of miles. So I've been up around the Frog Pond area and up towards Black and Diamond Lake a couple of times. Just really gorgeous views overlooking Oroville from that trail system. So longer hikes available for those who are interested, but lots of short loop options that don't require a long hike into the backcountry.
Awesome. Every time I talk to Holly about hikes in northeastern Washington, I really want to hike the Pacific Northwest Trail. Here's one that is not actually part of that trail system, but that you could theoretically use to access it. Moving a little farther west in Okanogan County to the Methow Valley, I wanted to highlight the Lost River. It's the Lost River Trail on the WTA website, but some maps call it the Monument Creek Trail. So I included both names there. As mentioned in my bio that Alicia shared, I really love trails that just meander through the woods along creeks. I love views and destination hikes too, but I guess that's what they call forest bathing now. I think it's totally worthwhile to walk through a wooded valley along a creek. And yeah, this Lost River Trail, there's a good turnaround point about 3.5 miles up at a bridge. For a while, it was the turnaround point because this bridge was out for many years. But just last year in 2022, the Forest Service, with I think some help from Backcountry Horsemen and possibly WTA as well, replaced the bridge. So there's a beautiful new footbridge there. There's a picture of my mom on the bridge this summer. So if you want to continue past the bridge, you can. The trail immediately starts switchbacking after that and heads up into some pretty remote country that hasn't been maintained in quite a while, as long as the bridge has been out. But now that the bridge is there, they're starting to chip away at it. So if you're feeling intrepid and you want to explore beyond Eureka Creek, you can check it out and write a trip report for WTA about what you find. And maybe eventually this trail will get you deep into the Pasayten Wilderness again. But for now, it's a really great, just kind of moderate distance hike along the Lost River. There's a couple spots where you can access the river, some really nice beaches. I think about a mile and a half in, there's a spot that would make a great campsite if you just wanted to do a super short backpack and camp along the river. And yeah, just really beautiful, mature ponderosa, Doug fir forest. When I was there earlier this summer, we ran into someone who was looking for gems up there. So I guess that's an option too if you're a rock hound. All right, moving on to Chelan County. This is my stomping ground, so it was hard to narrow down the options. But I always get people asking me, where can I go if I didn't get an enchantments permit? And I will tell you right now, there are so many amazing places to go that are not in the enchantments core permit area. And this is one of my favorites. This is Cradle Lake. That's the lake on the left there. This is up the icicle drainage. It's actually technically, it's sort of a high valley between Icicle Creek and Jack Creek and French and Meadow Creek, which make a big loop. So you can make a really awesome 21-mile loop starting at the Icicle Creek trailhead and exiting at the Jack Creek trailhead, or vice versa. I kind of like going in Icicle. I don't know why. I think it's kind of the same either way. And then there's just a 1-mile road walk in between the trailheads, but there's also a 1-mile horse trail that parallels the road. So if you just really don't want to have a road walk experience, you can take that trail in between the trailheads. It's a really beautiful area. You're deep in the heart of the Alpine Lakes Wilderness. You're near the crest. There's a bunch of creek crossings. Super remote, like you're at the end of the icicle drainage, which is always packed full of people recreating. But every time I've been on this trail, I've seen fewer than 5 people over several days. So one thing to know about this trail is that there is a bridge out across French Creek. So about 1.5 miles from the icicle trailhead, there's a creek crossing. The bridge there is out. It's probably going to be replaced in the next year or two. But it's not really doable early season. This year, I think folks were able to wade across French Creek by like mid-July because it was kind of an early melt out. But this is a good late summer loop. And I'll also add that again, there are also many options to either do a shorter hike or extend your hike with this loop. Icicle Creek is another lovely forest stroll. You can walk up the Icicle Creek Trail as far as you want, and it's really pleasant. And if you want to do more than 21 miles, this loop connects to a lot of other possibilities of places you can go in the middle of the Alpine Lakes. All right, another nice creek trail. This is over in the Eniat, the lower Mad River. So the Mad River trail system, I think the Mad River Trail total, lower and upper combined, is like 20 something miles. It is a moto trail. This is one of those moto trails that is absolutely worth hiking. The lower Mad River, it's a pretty accessible drive from the Eniat. I think you're on pavement all the way to the trailhead. And it just follows the creek. The wildflowers there in spring are incredible. You can see that's a picture of the Tweeties Lewisia on the left there. A wildflower that's endemic to the Wenatchee area, one of my favorites. And if you go on WTA, the trip reports for the lower Mad River, I think every single trip report had pictures of Tweeties Lewisia. So that's the spot to find it, apparently. Although just a heads up, this is where the Tweeties Lewisia grows. There are also rattlesnakes. That's generally a rule. So if you're there in the spring looking for flowers, also be looking for rattlesnakes. This trail burned, I can't really keep track of which fires burned which trails in the Eniat anymore because there's been so many, but this trail does go through a burn. It's been several years post-burn now, so there's a lot of new growth, a lot of regeneration, and so it's a really cool opportunity to just kind of see that process. And yeah, a good turnaround point here is about 3 miles up. The trail leaves the valley floor and starts to switch back. But if you want to extend your hike, you can absolutely keep going from there. Another moto trail worth hiking, and this one has a pretty extended seasonal closure. So a lot of trails that are multi-use that are open to motorcycles and bikes and horses are closed in the spring to prevent resource damage. Because when it's super muddy and wet, just the impact of tires and horse hooves and stuff can be a little more outsized than just hikers. So usually the closure lifts like sometime in July and then starts again in October. So that's a good window there. But this is a pretty challenging advanced bike trail. So it's not going to be one where you're going to run into a lot of people on either motos or mountain bikes. But yeah, Chickaman Tie, it's way up the Chickaman drainage at the very end of the road. I believe a pass is not required for this trailhead, so totally free. It has a bunch of awesome larches. It gets you pretty high, and also a bunch of those little beautiful waterfalls that I love in the Cascades, and some really cool views to the east out over the Eniat Mountains and towards the Eniat. Yeah, so a fun one, worth hiking. And finally, the last one I'll highlight for Chelan County. This is my backyard trail, the Peshastin Mill Trail. It's right here behind the fruit warehouses in Peshastin, so not far off the highway. It's just a lovely flat trail that goes along the Wenatchee River. You can take your dog, you can take your bike, you can take your kids. It has access to a couple really nice sandy beaches with good swimming holes. Earlier in the season, I would not recommend swimming here when the Wenatchee is running high. It's not safe for swimming, but this time of year, it's perfect. It's a great place to see lupin and arrowleaf balsam root in the spring in the ponderosas, but also just a great place to stretch your legs. I will say this trailhead can look less appealing than the trail itself because it's kind of behind all the fruit warehouses, and it's just this like huge empty concrete turnaround with like a porta potty, and sometimes people go there and they're like, this doesn't look that nice, but I promise if you walk beyond the gate, it's a really nice little trail. This is like one of my favorite places to run near my house. All right, and last but certainly not least, we're gonna mention a hike in Douglas County.
Yeah, it's the Douglas Creek Canyon, and there are a couple of different trailheads for this one, and I've only ever hiked Douglas Creek on the north end. So there's a bonus hike here that even I still need to go back and explore, but this is a really great one. It's on BLM land, which means no permit is required for access, and it's available for overnight use and backpacking as well. So when I was there, I actually did this as a winter backpacking trip. I think it would probably be a pretty hot, dry landscape in the height of summer, but for fall through winter and into early spring, it's just absolutely fantastic. And the thing that I was really surprised to learn about this one is that the trailhead and the initial portion of the trail, it's actually an old railroad grade. It was built in the early 1900s, and it was operational until 1985, which was shocking to me. But at this point, all of the railroad ties have been removed. And so it's a fairly flat hiking surface. Although I will add that there's a lot of rock fall along the route. And so it can be crushed gravel and maybe some larger boulders. So the footing is not super stable. It's not quite a rail trail, but maybe at some point in the future it will be. And it follows Douglas Creek for a couple of miles, which as a day hike is a really great option for just out and back along the old rail trail. The thing that I was also really shocked to see is it's, you can tell from the photos, sagebrush, not a lot of trees, although there are some Douglas fir in the canyons and along the creek. And I was super surprised to find beaver in the creek along the trail. And it was also, I could see fish. So it's active fish habitat. I'm not sure if the fishing's any good. I didn't try that, but fish and beaver in this otherwise very dry landscape that's just absolutely gorgeous. And for those who are a little bit more adventurous, you could try the trip that I did. And the thing I will mention about the BLM land, it doesn't have excellent signage. And so having some route finding skills and having a map of the area along, like a USGS topo map along, is recommended for those who want to backpack. But when I was there, my friend and I hiked up the railroad grade for about 2 or 3 miles. And then we just took off cross country to find a good place where we could access water fairly easily and have some really gorgeous views. And so you can see the picture I took at sunrise the second morning facing the east. We had water fairly close to our camp, but we had to filter. So there is access to water along the way, and it can be a really beautiful place to do a middle of the winter backpacking trip in addition to some day hiking. And this is all located out on the Waterville Plateau. So really fantastic views in all directions.
Awesome. Thanks, Holly. I went to Douglas Creek for the first time this year in the spring, and it's super cool. I think now we'll just go over quickly a few more resources that you can use on the WTA website as you begin or continue your hiking journey. And then we'll have some time for questions at the very end about some of the hikes. So this is the My Backpack feature. You can create an account on WTA that's your backpack, and you can see Holly's dashboard there. 309 trip reports, pretty amazing. Holly writes great trip reports, like so detailed. Yeah, so you can track all your trip reports there. You can save hikes that you want to do but haven't done yet. You can track the hikes you have done. And if you do decide to volunteer for trail work, you can also track all your volunteer days and hours there as well. Holly, I think you're a more avid user than I am of My Backpack. Do you have anything else to add about that feature?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that that took me a little while to figure out was when there's a hike that I'm particularly interested in, there is that way to save it to your backpack so that you can go back to it afterwards. So for the Kettle Crest Trail, you'll see that little orange banner there in the center that says "Save to my backpack" with a check mark. And then when you go over to the one that shows all of my trip reports and my crew leader corner info, you can see that I've saved 41 total. And at this point, I've worked my way through 12 of them. And that means I still have a lot of fun exploring to do. It's kind of the way I keep track of places where if I read a trip report that someone else wrote and I'm really interested in going to that place as well, I will go to the hiking guide entry and I will click on saving it to my backpack, so that a year from now, I will remember when I have a free weekend and I'm like, where can I go this weekend? And then I'll go back and look at my saved hikes and see which one sounds best for whatever the current conditions are.
Sweet. So we also have a section called Trail Smarts, which this is great if you're just getting into hiking, or if you're transitioning from day hiking to backpacking or winter hiking, or really for anyone at any stage in their hiking life. Just a lot of tips, information, information about leave no trace, about essential gear to bring, safety tips. And that's updated, somewhat regularly. So there'll be new stuff there.
And then some of our other resources that are available, we do have our signpost blog. And so that pops up on the website. We have several different emails that come out. So if you're interested in receiving our email newsletters, that includes our trail news, which is just basic information about trails across the state. We also have Families Go Hiking, which is really geared toward families with younger children. And then our Trail Action Network is a lot of our advocacy information. And if you're interested in receiving an email to let you know about upcoming comment periods or public meetings, that would be some of the resources that you'd receive through the Trail Action Network.
Neat. So yeah, a lot of ways to get involved with WTA and our community that we've kind of touched on already. You can write trip reports every time you go for a hike. And I know I saw several people mentioning in the chat how helpful they find trip reports. Like, I cannot emphasize enough, like, what an amazing feature this is. And if any of you have lived or hiked in other states, you know that we are so lucky in Washington to have this robust resource of trip reports and our hiking guide. It's so helpful. And I'll even say when I worked for the Forest Service, we read WTA trip reports all the time because we didn't have time to go out and scout every trail we were going to look at. So super helpful for land managers as well. You can volunteer. You can volunteer on a trail doing trail work. If that's not your thing, we also have volunteer opportunities doing more like outreach and ambassador type stuff, like tabling at events, telling people about WTA, signing them up for newsletters. Oh, one thing we really want to highlight here is our Northwest Exposure Photo Contest, because it is open right now. It's running through October 17th. And I think Alicia just dropped a link to that in the chat. Take note, there is a special East of the Cascades category. So there's a bunch of different categories that you can submit your photos, but if you're hiking east of the Cascades, you can definitely submit in that category. And this photo contest actually generates a lot of the photos that WTA uses in our calendar, in our magazine, and a lot of our publications. So if you enter this contest, your photos could get seen by a lot of people. But really, yeah, kind of the best way to get involved or to keep your options open is just to sign up for one or several of those newsletters to keep track of everything that's going on. Anything else to add on the involvement front, Holly?
I think you covered it. Thank you.
Cool. Oh yeah, we have a few more photos about it. Volunteer trail work. So if you go to the website and click on Get Involved, there is a web page for trail work volunteer opportunities. You can filter it by region. You can filter it by type of trail work. We have multi-day trail work trips as well as day work parties. Our multi-day season is kind of wrapping up this month. But as Holly mentioned, in Spokane, there are day work parties in the winter as well, and on the west side. All right, I think we're at question time.
And I already see a question in the chat. So recommendations for doing shorter sections of long hikes, for example, maybe 10 miles of the Kettle Crest. What is a good resource for local maps? So my favorite portions of the Kettle Crest that are really easy to access are just right out of Sherman Pass. So on the north side of Sherman Pass is the Columbia Mountain Loop. And it's a little bit less than 10 miles. I think if you hiked up to Columbia Mountain and then there's a summit loop trail and then back down to the trailhead, it's actually roughly 7 or 8 miles. And then on the south side of Sherman Pass is the Sherman Peak Loop. And I think the Sherman Peak Loop as a standalone is about 5.5, although it's really easy to tack on the side hike heading out to Snow Peak Cabin from there, just as an extra out and back. And then that would get you up, not quite to 10 miles, but pretty close to it. So those are my two go-to and a super easy access. But I also recently did a backpacking trip on the Kettle Crest where I started at Sherman Pass and I hiked in 10 miles and camped and then hiked back out the next day, which is another really fun way to tackle that one. And then in terms of a good resource for local maps, because yeah, Green Trails oftentimes doesn't extend all the way out into Eastern Washington. And so the source that I actually use the most is a business that's located in Spokane called Frugal Navigator. And you can order USGS topo maps from his website. If you're in the Spokane area and happen to go into the REI in Spokane, they have his maps available at REI in Spokane. But he also has a super usable website where you can choose which USGS topo maps you are interested in, order from his website. I think that they run a little bit less than $10 a piece. And last time I ordered, the shipping was free. And they're printed on the really nice water resistant, tear resistant paper, and they're double-sided, which is really handy. So it's a matter of looking up which USGS maps you need first, but I found it to be a really helpful resource for covering large swaths of land. And then if you get into more specific areas, sometimes smaller land managers will have specific maps for their area. but that can be a little bit hit and miss. Like, I haven't found a fantastic Forest Service map, for example. BLM does have some small maps. They're just 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper. So they're not super detailed, not great to use for route finding the way the USGS topo maps are, but there are some good BLM maps available. And yeah, I don't know if Claire has more to add on that, on the topic.
No, that's awesome to know about the Frugal Navigator. I didn't know about that. I'm a big fan of paper maps and definitely advocate for that, but I also increasingly use CalTopo on my phone for navigating. There's a bunch of different map apps that you can get into, and everyone has their favorites. I started using CalTopo, and there's a free version and a paid version. So that can also be a way, if you can't find a paper map of where you want to go, you can at least find it on your phone and have it there. But yeah.
Great.
Oh yeah, and someone just let me know in the chat that with CalTopo, you can also print your own map on your home printer as well. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Any other questions?
I had a question. Thank you ladies so much. I feel like my brain's overflowing with inspiration now. And yeah, in the chat too, people are saying thank you so much for representing so much of our region that we cover. That's really exciting to see. If someone is a beginner, like what are things that they could look for? There's so many options. There's so many good trip reports. What are things that they could look for on searching hikes on WTA's website that would help them find a good fit for them? Any tips on that?
So you can actually sort hikes in the hiking guide, and you can say, this is the distance that I'm interested in, and this is the maximum elevation gain I'm interested in. And then it will give you hike suggestions that fit the parameters that you're interested in. Yeah, so if you are not a fan of the steep climbs, you can enter that in and you can keep it low elevation gain as a great example.
Yeah, and I would also say too, I mean, and this is kind of, I think a lot of the hikes we mentioned fit this category, like you can also always do part of a hike. And I think, you know, we tend to get really focused on like reaching the ultimate destination. And sometimes I think we get this tunnel vision and don't notice all the cool stuff on the way to that destination as well. So that's why I really like hikes that have like nice, like forested sections at the beginning.
Yeah, and I'm always more than happy to get a short hike in if that's all I have time for. My hike today was 1.5 miles because I had a meeting and then I had a little gap before the next meeting started, but I was up at Mount Spokane State Park. So I went in 3/4 mile and I turned around and came back out again. It's fine to turn around early.
I'm seeing a couple questions in the chat. One is favorite day hikes in the North Cascades, and I saw someone already responded with some good options there. Yeah, Maple Heather Loop is a super popular hike for seeing larches. It's one that's popular for a good reason. It's gorgeous. You get views almost immediately and continuously. And the Lost River hike I mentioned is actually quite close to Maple Pass in that area. It's in Mazama. I also saw a question asking how best to support PNT hikers passing through communities in Northeast Washington. Holly, I wonder if you have any thoughts about that.
Wait, so I missed that one.
I know, I'm having trouble keeping up.
I know. Can you read it one more time?
No, where did it go? In Northeast Washington, how can we best support PNT hikers passing through our communities?
Oh, well, so with the PNT hikers, oftentimes there's a like yearly publication that comes out with folks who want to be trail angels. And so like one way could just be contacting PNTA and being added to the Trail Angel list, or they have a really active Facebook page just for like local folks who want to offer a ride or offer a shower or offer a meal. And I know that there are several businesses all along the route that have hiker boxes available. So if folks wanted to just make a donation to a hiker box, that'd be a great way to support the thru hikers as well.
Oh, and regarding, yeah, Maple, Heather Loop, and Blue Lake, I actually think those both just reopened after the fire closures. I could be wrong. I can check that for a second. Or maybe I can't because I'm sharing my screen, but I don't know if anyone else is able to check that real quick. I did hear that I know the highway's open again, that some of the closures have lifted.
Yeah, and I haven't heard specifically about that one. And I see a shout out for Gaia. Gaia is also my favorite. I tend to use Caltopo on my desktop and Gaia through the app. And I find that that works really well for me. And then definitely I'm a paper fan.
The website does say that Maple Pass Loop is closed.
Okay.
I have a question. And you're in the jump. I feel like the chat is jumping around though. So if the question isn't answered, please resubmit it. But you know, in your bio, Claire, you're like, it's always worth bringing a book and a journal. What are your like hiking must-haves? I guess that's, you know, depending on the season, but any suggestions on great things to bring on your hike?
Well, beyond the 10 essentials, which we do have a list of those on the WTA website, and a lot of resources for making sure you have all the safety gear you need. Yeah, when I'm backpacking, yeah, I love to bring reading material and a journal. To save weight, I will often bring like magazines to read on backpacking trips instead of bringing a full book. That's a cool way to do it. Or I have books that I like save to read on backpacking trips because there's like slim paperbacks, you know? So I'm like, oh, it'd be a waste to read this at home. I'll read this when I'm backpacking. I think for me, one of my sort of necessary luxuries has become a lightweight folding chair, or like well, there's like different styles of chair, but the one I have, it's pretty cheap. I think it was like 20 or 30 bucks, and it's sort of the Crazy Creek style that like folds in half and you sit on the ground with it and you can roll it up. But that has been a total game changer in the backcountry for me, especially on longer trips, like to actually have something to lean against. And I love it because when I'm in my tent, if it's like raining or the bugs are terrible and I have to just hang out in my tent at camp, I can actually like sit in my tent and lean back against something while I'm hanging out and reading or writing in my journal.
And I totally do that exact same thing. I have a special stack of books that are my small paperbacks and they are earmarked for backpacking.
Eric just said, tear out the pages you've read already, and the librarian in me is dying inside.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there are any other essential things, other than the 10 essentials, any necessary luxuries I like to bring.
I find all luxuries very necessary. I am not a fan of the ultralight backpacking. I know a lot of folks are, and that's awesome for them. We had a great conversation on my last trip about, you know, like I had folks along who cut their toothbrushes in half, and then there's me who brings a book and brings a blanket and brings a chair. I like to be comfortable.
Totally. It is a balance. oh, someone mentioned Cedar Creek Trail as a North Cascades hike. That's, yeah, I was trying to remember that one. That's, yeah, also a really great hike off Highway 20, a good day hike. Oh, Anna Maria, thank you for mentioning Ingalls. Yes. I love Ingalls Creek. That one, it can be pretty popular in the first few miles, but it again offers opportunities to go as long or as short as you want. There are campsites like literally within a mile of the trailhead. If you want to do like a practice backpacking trip, it's perfect for that. But you can also hike 14 miles up to Stewart Pass on Ingalls Creek if you want to. It's really cool. Some cool larches up there too. Deception Falls. I'm loving seeing all these recommendations in the chat. This is awesome. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
cool.
seems like a great way to kind of, if people don't have questions, to wrap things up, to shoot out your favorite hike in the region. That would be really fun to see.
I was gonna say a cool side trip off Ingalls also, or a way to access it, is the Fourth Creek and Beverly Turnpike trails. I think Fourth Creek is, I want to say like maybe 12 miles from the Ingalls Creek trailhead. But it's only, you can access it from the Cle Elum side. So you can hike in, if you want to save yourself a hike, if you want to do a longer drive and a shorter hike, you can hike into Ingalls from that side. But if you're hiking up Ingalls, it's a cool little day side trip to do a loop, like up Fourth Creek and down Beverly Turnpike, or vice versa.
I have a quick question. What's some knowledge that you feel like beginner people that wants to start backpacking should know?
Anything under the category of leave no trace.
Hmm.
Had a long conversation with folks on my last backpacking trip because we saw what we refer to as Charmin flowers, which is where folks probably do it because they didn't research it ahead of time, but just like how to deal with human waste or with trash, how to lessen impacts on the environment. So I always really like to start with like understanding some of the basics of the leave no trace practices as a way to transition into backpacking, because whenever you're going to be out overnight, there's some like additional considerations, things that you normally take care of, especially with indoor plumbing, that need to be taken care of in the woods. And I feel like that's the one where sometimes folks don't really think about it until there's an emergency situation. So, and then also just, you know, the 10 essentials, because those are the things that'll keep you safe in the event of any sort of emergency.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, I think I would also say, like, for beginning backpackers, yeah, in addition to the things Holly mentioned, you know, just like being aware that like there's no one size fits all approach to the experience, to gear, to your pace, to anything like that. So you can learn a lot by talking to people who are more experienced or reading things online, but it also doesn't have to look exactly the same for you as it does for everyone else. And you'll figure out what works for you as you gain more experience.
My first backpack was one that I picked up at a yard sale for $10. And my first backpacking pot that I was cooking in was one that I stole from my mom's kitchen. So that's the other one. It's like, it doesn't have to be the newest and fanciest gear either. It might be a little bit less comfortable, because that backpack was not comfortable. But it was only $10. So
oh yeah, I also want to shout out, maybe I'll find the link to it in a second, but WTA, we have a page with a list of resources for places where you can borrow or rent gear, or buy like used gear, consigned gear. The one local one I'll just shout out is Kolchak Consignment in Kashmir. If you're in the Wenatchee area, they have a bunch of awesome used outdoor gear, and they also have a gear library where you can borrow gear from them. And if other people know of similar resources in their area, please do share them.
Can you repeat the one in Kolchak that you just mentioned by the Kashmir, what the place is called?
Yeah. So it's in Kashmir and it's called Kolchak Consignment.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, they're super cool.
Yeah, and I'm much farther east in the Spokane area. It's Ramble Raven Gear Traders has used gear, but honestly, the majority of my secondhand gear just came from Goodwill. And it's incredible what I can find for hiking clothing, especially at the local Goodwill.
Alicia, does the library have maps that you check out? Is that a thing also?
We have maps. I mean, not what you're talking about, but in our little kit, it's a more basic, just the Washington State parks, and then more like guides. So not to the detail that people are needing to be able to navigate. All right, we're at 7:01. Any last questions? Holly and Claire, you've been amazing. You gave us so many great resources, and I feel like you gave us some insider info too. That's really fun. We've had some great questions from everyone. Lots of thanks in the chat. So last call for the last question. I will share that we've recorded this. Holly and Claire let us record it, so thank you to them. And I will send out the recording link tomorrow so that you can have access to rewatch. Be like, what was that hike? There were so many to write down. So
cool. Thanks so much, Alicia. Thanks for hosting this.
thank you both.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who attended tonight. This was a lot of fun.
Yay.
Yeah. Maybe we'll see you out there.
Yes. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.